afternoon. As Marshal of the University of Chicago, it's my honor to welcome you to the continuation of the 519th Convocation of the University of Chicago, the presentation of diplomas to the graduates of the Division of the Social Sciences. Let me now introduce the Dean of the Division of the Social Sciences, Mario Small.
On behalf of the faculty of the Division of the Social Sciences, welcome to Rockefeller Memorial Chapel in the University of Chicago. This morning, President Robert Zimmer conferred degrees on 165 students who have completed programs of advanced studies in the social sciences. This afternoon, my colleagues and I have the honor to recognize their achievements individually by presenting them with the diplomas and hoods of the University of Chicago. Today, we celebrate their accomplishments. But today we also mark the culmination of our own work as the faculty in the social sciences. In recognizing these graduates of our programs, we also reflect upon our accomplishments as teachers, consultants, directors, and advisors. Each year, we honor some of our numbers upon nomination by our students with the Faculty Award for Excellence in Graduate Teaching. We are pleased to recognize 3 of our faculty members today. Let me introduce Professor Bruce Cumings from the Department of History to present the first award.
Leora Auslander's conceptually and innovative work has transformed the understanding of culture and taste in everyday life. Her scholarship extends to many domains, including French and European history, history of race, studies in feminism, Jewish history, and the history of consumerism. The wide influence of her scholarship is evident in invitations to the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton and to the Center for Advanced Study in the Behavioral Sciences at Stanford. She's made enormous contributions in the teaching and mentoring of dozens of graduate students and has been a key force in restructuring the History Department's PhD program, enhancing our mentoring and involving herself in every aspect of our graduate education. Dean Small, I have the honor to present Leora Auslander for the Faculty Award for Excellence in Graduate Teaching and Mentoring.
A most accomplished historian, Leora Auslander has devoted herself to the teaching and mentoring of many graduate students and has worked tirelessly to ensure that each student's education is productive, insightful, and rewarding. I now introduce Professor Stephan Palmie from the Department of Anthropology to present the next award.
Throughout her long and distinguished career, Susan Gall has been a driving force in establishing the Department of Anthropology's reputation for semiotically oriented linguistic anthropology. Brilliantly straddling topical fields as diverse as Europeanist anthropology, post-socialist studies, feminist theories, and the work of linguistic ideologies in contemporary ethno-national politics, our work has served as a source of tremendous inspiration to our graduate students. Students and alumni, some of whom are now well on their way to establish preeminent reputations in the discipline for themselves, consistently praise the intellectual rigor and critical discipline she imparted to them in the course of their education. They also extol her unflagging devotion to her students, the patience, kindness, generosity, and astute attention to detail of fact or writing with which she constructively critiques their work, and the many ways in which she exemplifies the kind of educator they aspire to be. Dean Small, I have the honor to present Susan Gall for the Faculty Award for Excellence in Graduate Teaching and Mentoring.
Through her innovative scholarship, pedagogical dedication, and flagging attention to her students, and exemplary service, Susan Gall has made a lasting impact on her students and on the discipline of anthropology.
Susan Gall was unable to attend today's ceremony, but I'm pleased to accept on her behalf.
I now introduce Kathy Cohen from the Department of Political Science with this year's final teaching award.
A brilliant scholar of contemporary political and social theory and the history of political thought, Patchen Markell epitomizes the dual roles of a gifted intellectual and masterful teacher, interrogating such fundamental concepts as identity, power, and democracy. He invites his students to examine, criticize, and transform the language and concepts we use to make sense of our relations to each other and to the world. In the classroom, he patiently includes everyone while demanding the highest standards of scholarly engagement. He models by example the need to think of research as both process and practice. While always upholding excellence, he treats his students with great care and generosity, influencing not only their academic careers, but more significantly, their lives. Dean Small, I have the honor to present Patchen Markell for the Faculty Award for Excellence in Graduate Teaching and Mentoring.
Patchen Markell exemplifies the rigor, generosity, and dedication of a consummate teacher who both manifests and inspires exceptional intellectual inquiry.
It is my privilege to introduce Professor Elisabeth Clemens, who will deliver the remarks. Professor Clemens is the William Rainey Harper Professor of Sociology and the College, and chair of the Department of Sociology. She earned her doctoral degree in sociology from the University of Chicago in 1990. She taught at the University of Arizona before joining our faculty at the University of Chicago in 2002. Professor Clemens' scholarship focuses on the role of social movements and organizational innovation, particularly in political change. She is the author of The People's Lobby, Organizational Innovation and the Rise of Interest Group Politics in the United States, 1890 to 1925, which won Best Book Awards in both organizational sociology and political sociology. She is also co-editor of Private Action and the Public Good, and Remaking Modernity, Politics and Processes in Historical Sociology. Professor Clemens is co-editor of Politics and Partnerships, Voluntary Associations in America's Political Past and Present, which was awarded the Virginia Hodgkinson Best Book Prize. She is now completing Civic Nation, which traces the entanglements of benevolence and liberalism in the development of the American nation-state. She is a member of the editorial advisory board of the Journal of Studies in American Political Development and has served as president of the Social Science History Association. Professor Clemens.
Welcome. My congratulations to all the graduates. Speaking for the faculty, we are enormously proud of your accomplishments. Congratulations also to your family members and friends gathered for this celebration. Our thanks also go to them for all their support and enthusiasm, which I know you have drawn on many times along the way. I am back in this place many years after I sat where you now sit. And thinking about that day as I prepared my remarks, I've taken quite a bit of comfort in the fact that I can't actually remember much of what was said. I have a clear memory of the emotional tone and the power of this setting. I recall being surprised that it wasn't the usual speech calling upon us to do wonderful things in the world, but that it had something to do with Russia. What I do remember is the rumor that earlier in the day, a graduating MBA student had attempted to hug or perhaps even kiss the university president, and that she had not been amused. This minor uproar threatened to disrupt a tradition. In what was a significantly smaller University of Chicago, the president then attended multiple convocations, shaking each and every hand. But in form, this uproar poses a question central to historical sociology and the study of institutional change. How does change happen? what is the role of events, be they minor uproars or major crises? Crisis does not necessarily produce significant change. After all, impending disaster can be met with denial and paralysis. Even when the damage is visible, it may be difficult to mobilize a response. Writing almost 6 years after the stock market crash of 1929, one officer of the American Red Cross looked back to the First World War to make sense of the situation. There was shell shock then. There is depression shock today. This sentiment resonates in the here and now as we are bombarded with regular reports of climate change, regional conflict, and economic dysfunction. But you should take comfort. Social scientists have developed powerful methods for understanding the sources of crisis and the capacities required to meet or master them. Social structural origins, degrees of openness and contingency, the mobilization and deployment of skill and networks, all of these illuminate the politics of organizing powers in eventful times. What remains elusive in many of these explanations is the anatomy of the crisis, its extension in time, and the ways in which response reshapes crisis. Now, in many cities, this would be an academic quibble, but this is not just any city. This is Chicago. And to quote the words of our mayor, you never let a serious crisis go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things you think you could not do before, to which the political novice or the interested scholar or those of us who fill both roles might respond, how? Rather than wrestling with this question theoretically, I will follow two lives as they intersected with one extended crisis. With apologies in advance to all the extraordinary social scientists, many of them seated here, who have championed inclusiveness and attention to diversity in our scholarship. These lives belong to two dead white men, both from Iowa, born within 16 years and 300 miles of one another. Herbert Hoover served as President of the United States from 1929 to 33. Harry Hopkins took charge of relief programs for Franklin Roosevelt when he was governor of New York from 1929 to 32, and then served as federal relief administrator for the new president. This pair of lives, Hoover and Hopkins, permits both a cross-sectional comparison as both men wrestled with the onset of economic collapse, and a sequential comparison as Hopkins inherited responsibility for relieving a crisis that had been shaped and reshaped by Hoover's actions. These two men not only shared the same crisis, they also came to it with similar backgrounds, experiences, skills, and networks. Neither had the advantage of a complete and stable family. Both were shaped but not defined by religious upbringing, and both seized the opportunities afforded by higher education. Hoover was admitted to Stanford, Hopkins to Grinnell. Now, at this point, their biographies do diverge, as Hoover set off on what was a spectacular career in large-scale mining that traversed continents, made him a millionaire, and brought him to international prominence as he choreographed the evacuation of American citizens at the onset of the First World War in Europe. He administered food relief to Belgium and later to war refugees throughout Europe. He was courted by both parties as a political candidate, served as Secretary of Commerce, and then used his role in responding to the catastrophic Mississippi River floods of 1927 as an audition for his campaign for the presidency in 1928. His campaign film was titled Master of Emergencies, and at this point in his career, he unquestionably merited the claim. So let me underscore the analytic challenge that's posed by Herbert Hoover to contemporary theories that emphasize the role of agency, social skill, and expansive networks in processes of institutional change. In these terms, Hoover was astoundingly well prepared to serve as executive officer at the time of a multifaceted, massive, complex social disaster. And yet he is popularly remembered as a failure, a devastating, total failure. Hoover fought that assessment for the rest of his very long life, but the reputational judgment of his time poses an important puzzle. given that Hoover had all the advantages that figure so centrally in our models of effective action? How can we understand rather than assume his apparent impotence in the face of crisis? Before I address that question, let me return to the second of my men from Iowa, Harry Hopkins. Setting aside that piece about the multi-million-dollar fortune, that didn't happen, Hopkins was the same kind of phenom. After graduating from Grinnell, he made his way up the ranks of one of New York City's most important welfare organizations. During the war, he worked for the Red Cross, and by the 1920s, was its associate manager for the Gulf Coast. All in all, this was not too bad for a boy from Iowa with no connections at the beginning. On a smaller scale, Hopkins had accumulated many of the same resources as Hoover: experience in private relief agencies and public bureaucracies, network ties to political and economic elites. On the eve of the crisis, therefore, both Hoover and Hopkins were counted among those with expertise and extensive experience in the management of large-scale relief. Hoover's experience to date had been more varied, more celebrated, and much, much, much more remunerative. But both Hoover and Hopkins would clearly count as skilled actors. But whereas Hoover was judged a failure at the time, Hopkins' allies agreed that he had done all that could have possibly been done in difficult times, while his enemies labeled him a consummate manipulator who had successfully harnessed federal relief to Democratic Party politics. To explain these dramatically different assessments of Hoover and Hopkins, let us return to that saying of Mayor Emanuel's, "Never let a serious crisis go to waste." What is a crisis, and when do we know that we are in one? The first years of what would become the Great Depression involved interpretive struggles over whether a crisis existed and whether it was within or beyond the bounds of a normal crisis, which was the language of the time. The response took the form of an unprecedented deployment of very familiar methods for meeting a normal crisis, an outpouring of private contributions that was extraordinary, even if ultimately and utterly unequal to the enormous scale of the need. Although the events of our own recent past have taught us to be suspicious of the words of bankers, consider what one wrote to Hoover in January of 1931. In the cities, we have the community chest, to which I contribute regularly for the dependents of our city. But the drought is very unusual and covers the country people. I think they should be helped, and that adequately. But it all should be done by law, and the money raised through the income tax. No other way is democratic and fair, and by it the burden falls on those who can pay it, and in just proportion. Pigs fly, hell freezes over, and bankers call for higher taxes. This letter, and many others like it, document the discrediting of a once dominant model for responding to national crises. Precisely because Hoover was the master of emergencies, his failure convinced many of the need to try something different. If Hoover could not make the familiar methods work, then no one could. Hoover's political genius, to quote the historian David Kennedy, rested on a choreography of government funds and authority, solicitation of help from private business, and mass contributions from citizens, both as volunteers and donors. But as more and more calls came for direct government aid, Hoover's reaction was to fiercely decouple these pieces, to start insisting on purely voluntary action, in contrast to his tried and true recipe for success in earlier crises. Pressured by demands from one side for a strictly voluntary response and from the other for direct federal relief spending, Hoover abandoned the position at the intersection of cross-cutting networks and practices that he had so masterfully exploited in previous crises. Unlike Hoover, who reacted to growing unemployment by minimizing the problem, Hopkins took charge of distributing millions of dollars of state funding for relief to cities and counties across New York. When he moved to Washington, D.C. after the inauguration, however, Hopkins did not simply replace these old, inadequate systems of voluntary relief with publicly funded federal entitlements. Instead, he transposed networks cultivated in private relief and the powerful social technology of casework to manage serious problems of public administration. It turned out that the techniques that worked to get truant boys to school and drunken parents to work also worked with dysfunctional state governments. And that was an extraordinary technology for someone trying to drive a system of national social provision through an extraordinarily fragmented landscape of public administration. Although the specific configuration differed in many ways, it's important to recognize the extent to which the New Deal actually reconstructed these hybrid, overlapping, intersectional spaces that had been so central to Hoover's abilities as the master of emergencies. The lives of these two men from Iowa underscore basic lessons about how not to waste a crisis. The first is to remember that crises take time, a lesson more often missed by social scientists with schematic models than historians deeply engaged in narrative. But for both, it is important to remember that and how the horizon of possibilities shift as the crisis is endured. By thinking about crises as extended opportunities, we also appreciate how skillful action reshapes the unfolding of eventful times, even if it fails on its own terms. As the master of emergencies, Hoover's genius lay in the ability to articulate three models of organization with different premises and often conflicting elements. But as the Depression endured, and as some of his allies insisted on keeping government funds out of the mix, this long-valued model was discredited. This specific crisis was marked by Hoover's loss and Hopkins' reconstruction of a particular source of power that has figured in American nation and state building for much of its history, the capacity of strategic actors to sit at the intersection of multiple networks and models of organizing. So, to the graduates, as you go out into a world that is and will be rocked by what may or may not be crises, remember a few things. First, you are already masters of diverse models and methods. Hold on to those possibilities and learn more. Cultivate multiple networks of friends and allies, but try not to be captured by any one of them. Look for the sites of intersection and creative recombination. There lie possibilities for mobilizing lines of action to meet whatever challenges and opportunities come your way. And celebrate. Congratulations to you all.
At this time, in the favoring presence of the congregation here assembled, the chairs of the several departments and programs, or their appointed representatives, will present the recipients of diplomas to the Dean of the Division. The chair of the Committee on International Relations will now present to the Dean the recipients of the degree of Master of Arts in International Relations.
Dean Small, these students have completed the program of study prescribed by the faculty and the Committee of International Relations. On behalf of the faculty and the Committee on International Relations, I now have the honor to present them as recipients of the degree of Master of Arts.
You have successfully completed a program of advanced study in the Committee on International Relations. I now present you with the diploma of the University of Chicago.
Taylor Lynn Ballinger. Brittany Barham. Kelly Jolie Cheever. Jessica Chow. Christopher Dawson Koppel. Laura Doolin. Gentry Kip Jenkins. Amanda Leung Ting Lee. Wu Chi Leo. Elisabeth Marden. Lindsay Markell. Andrew James Morimoto. Gung Tuk Nguyen. Philip Harris Pratt. Matthew James Reisner. Elaine Frances Sayer. Tatiana Skripnik. Tiffany Zihan Tai. Alexander Rain Versko Cruz. Christina Tara Williams.
The Deputy Director of the Center for Middle Eastern Studies will now present to the Dean the recipients of the degree of Master of Arts in Middle Eastern Studies.
Dean Small, these students have completed the program of study prescribed by the faculty in the Center for Middle Eastern Studies. On behalf of the faculty in the Center for Middle Eastern Studies, I now have the honor to present them as recipients of the degree of Master of Arts.
You have successfully completed a program of advanced study in Middle Eastern Studies. I now present you with the diploma of the University of Chicago.
Mohammed Ali M. Alehbi. Kyle Weston Bellows. Brittany Seabrook Collins. David Andrew Helfand. Brian Keenan. Ori Kleinman. Gordon Cooper Close. Michael Lawrence Payne. Cara Ann Paruccio. Jose Orthon Revolta. Mohammed Saha. Sami Suleiman. Samuel Matthew Taylor. Patrick Edward Tavenau. Andrew Franklin Versteg. Brittany Nicole Waranius. Naz Ujal.
The faculty director of the Master of Arts program in the Social Sciences and deputy director of MA programs in the Social Sciences Division will now present to the dean the recipients of the degree of Master of Arts in the Social Sciences.
Dean Small, these students have completed the program of study prescribed by the faculty in the Master of Arts program in the Social Sciences. On behalf of the faculty in the Social Sciences Division, I now have the honor to present them as recipients of the degree of Master of Arts.
You have successfully completed a program of advanced study in the social sciences. I now present you with the diploma of the University of Chicago.
Kyle C. Barker, Richard Brust, Heather Chan, Chen Cheng, Catherine Elena Cherry, Joshua Donovan, Ja Gai, Kyle Christopher Garner, Jeffrey Evans Grimm, Colin Glenn Hawk, Jisoo Hong, Ksenia Viktorovna Konkina, Ian Lewenstein, Susanna Marchinak, Elisabeth Ann Marsden, Jean Metelsky Bolware, Kelly Messenger, Sydney Ann Miller, Christopher Joseph Mills, Stacy Elizabeth Morell, Megan Lee Niehaus, Rieko Ouchi, Brittany Kyle Pearson, Greg Andrew Polczyk, Nathan Lee Robbins, Barton Alexander O'Donnell Rohde, David Lee Romney, Benjamin Michael Studebaker, Han Chang Tan, Matthew Sprague Villeneuve, Christina Wang, Wenhao Wong, and Chenan Justin Wu.
the chair of the Department of Anthropology, will now present to the dean the recipients of the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Anthropology.
Dean Small, each of the students I now present has attained scholarly distinction in advanced studies and has prepared a dissertation which contributes to knowledge in a particular field of research. On behalf of the faculty in the Department of Anthropology, I now have the honor to present them as recipients of the degree of Doctor of Philosophy.
You have successfully completed a program of advanced study in anthropology. I now present you with a diploma and hood of the University of Chicago and welcome you to this ancient and honorable company of scholars.
Claudia Gastro negotiated settlements, housing, and the aesthetics of citizenship in Luanda, Angola. Peter Joseph Grave, Talk/Intelligible, Language and Objecthood in Deaf Kathmandu. Elina Inkeri Hartikainen, A Candomblé Politics of Respect, Forming an African Religious Public in Multiculturalist Brazil. Maureen Elisabeth Marshal, Subject et Bodies, a bioarchaeological investigation of late Bronze Age Iron I in brackets 1500 to 800 BC Armenia. David Bartholomew Pacifico, Neighborhood Politics, Diversity, Community and Authority at El Purgatorio, Peru. Abigail Judith Rosenthal, The Politics of Differentiation, Public Participation and the Closing of the South Dakota School for the Deaf. Melissa Sarah Rosenzweig, Imperial Environments, The Politics of Agricultural Practice at Ziyaret Tepe, Turkey in the first millennium BCE.
The chair of the Department of Comparative Human Development will now present to the dean the recipients of the degrees of Master of Arts and Doctor of Philosophy in Comparative Human Development and Doctor of Philosophy in Human Development.
Dean Small, this student has completed the program of study prescribed by the faculty in the Department of Comparative Human Development. On behalf of the faculty in the Department of Comparative Human Development, I now have the honor to present her as a recipient of the degree of Master of Arts.
You have successfully completed a program of advanced study in comparative human development. I now present you with a diploma of the University of Chicago.
Megan Neaton. Dean Small, each of the students I now present has attained scholarly distinction in advanced studies and has prepared a dissertation which contributes to knowledge in a particular field of research. On behalf of the faculty in the Department of Comparative Human Development, I now have the honor to present them as recipients of the degree of Doctor of Philosophy.
You have successfully completed a program of advanced study in comparative human development. I now present you with a diploma and hood of the University of Chicago and welcome you to this ancient and honorable company of scholars.
John Davey. Tara Marissa Mandalewala. Dean Small, each of the students I now present has attained scholarly distinction in advanced studies and has prepared a dissertation which contributes to knowledge in a particular field of research. On behalf of the faculty in the Department of Comparative Human Development, I now have the honor to present them as recipients of the degree of Doctor of Philosophy.
You have successfully completed a program of advanced study in human development. I now present you with the Diploma and Hood of the University of Chicago and welcome you to this ancient and honorable company of scholars.
Aaron Fitzpatrick Benke, exploring reflective function, attachment, risk, and substance abuse. Michael Kaufman, the illusory promise of professional success in the shadow of social development, a 46-year longitudinal study of Harvard College students from late adolescence to late midlife.
A representative from the Department of Economics will now present to the Dean the recipients of the degrees of Master of Arts and Doctor of Philosophy in Economics.
Dean Small, these students have completed the program of study prescribed by the faculty in the Department of Economics. On behalf of the faculty in the Department of Economics, I now have the honor to present them as recipients of the degree of Master of Arts.
You have successfully completed a program of advanced study in economics. I now present you with a diploma of the University of Chicago.
Santiago Caicedo Soler. Nicolas Andres Castro Cienfuegos. Chien Yu Lai. Simone Lenzu. Nuno Oliveira Esusa. Pablo Robles Santamarina. Jorge Patricio Rodriguez Osorio. Jose Francisco Tudon Maldonado. Dean Small, each of the students I now present has attained scholarly distinction in advanced studies and has prepared a dissertation which contributes to knowledge in a particular field of research. On behalf of the faculty in the Department of Economics, I have the honor to present them as recipients of the degree of Doctor of Philosophy.
You have successfully completed a program of advanced study in economics. I now present you with a diploma and hood of the University of Chicago and welcome you to this ancient and honorable company of scholars.
David Morris Edward Burke, Essays on the Legal Labor Market. Kevin Cherniak Corinth, Competition and Homelessness. James Thomas Edwards, Essays on Charitable Giving and Nonprofit Organizational Behavior. Ryan Yu-Hao Fang, on the Economics of Media Bias. Daisuke Fuji, Essays on International Trade Dynamics. Jin Yueb Kim, Models to Understand Incentives in Conflict. Jose Joaquin Lopez Licea, Essays on Rent-Seeking and Productivity. Eric Reed Nielsen, Ordinal Estimation of Income Achievement Gaps and Adult Outcome Inequality. Allison Jane Rao, Essays on Black Immigrants in the U.S. Armin Rick, Essays on the Benefits of Limited Transparency. Roberto Robato, Essays in Macroeconomics, Finance, and Risk. Sebastian Sotelo Rabagliati, Essays in Trade Theory and Applications. Marshal Israel Steinbaum, Essays in Labor Market Geography. Serginio Sylvan, Does Human Capital Risk Explain the Value Premium Puzzle? Daniel Isaac Tannenbaum, Essays on the Economics of Education. Adrian Tencate Sierra, Industry Composition, Trade Barriers, and Their Welfare Implications, Evidence from Peru's Trade Liberalization. Philip Manuel Tillman, Entry into Electoral Races and the Quality of Representation. Stephen Pavel Dennis Wolton, Essays in Strategic Communication in Politics.
The chair of the Department of History will now present to the Dean recipients of the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in History.
Dean Small, each of the students I present has attained scholarly distinction in advanced studies and has prepared a dissertation which contributes to knowledge in a particular field of research. On behalf of the faculty in the Department of History, I have the honor to present them as recipients of the degree of Doctor of Philosophy.
You have successfully completed a program of advanced study in history. I now present you with the Diploma and Hood of the University of Chicago and welcome you to this ancient and honorable company of scholars.
Sarah Elisabeth Hume, The Alteration of Tradition, the Performance, Production, and Preservation of Alsatian Traditional Dress, 1870 to 1939. Atia Khan, The Vicissitudes of Democracy, the Failure of the Left in Pakistan, 1940 to 1971. Isatsugu Kusabu, Komnenian Orthodoxy and Byzantine Heresiology in the 12th century, a study of the panoplia dogmatic of Euthymios Zigabenos. Casey Marina Lertz, Exporting from Eden, Coffee Migration and the Development of the Soconusco, Mexico, 1867 to 1920. Sarah Miller Davenport, State of the New, Hawaii Statehood and Global Decolonization in American Culture, 1945 to 1978. Jose Luis Ramos, Diplomacy, Social Politics, and United States-Mexico Relations after the Mexican Revolution, 1919 to 1930. Dora Cecilia Sanchez Hidalgo Hernandez, Building a Modern Port, Urban Space, Local Government, and Social Change in Veracruz, Mexico, 1872 to 1914.
The chair of the Department of Political Science will now present to the Dean the recipients of the degrees of Master of Arts and Doctor of Philosophy in Political Science.
Dean Small. These students have completed the program of study prescribed by the faculty in the Department of Political Science. On behalf of the faculty in the Department of Political Science, I now have the honor to present them as recipients of the degree of Master of Arts.
You have successfully completed a program of advanced study in political science. I now present you with the diploma of the University of Chicago.
Stephanie Ahrens Bauman. Delara Kadrei Uskup. Sarita Zavini. Dean Small. Each of the students I now present has attained scholarly distinction in advanced studies and has prepared a dissertation which contributes to knowledge in a particular field of research. On behalf of the faculty in the Department of Political Science, I have the honor to present them as recipients of the degree of Doctor of Philosophy.
You have successfully completed a program of advanced study in political science. I now present you with the diploma and hood of the University of Chicago and welcome you to this ancient and honorable company of scholars.
Adam Hillel Dean, The Gilded Wage, Domestic Profit-Sharing Institutions and the Political Economy of International Trade. Claire Colleen McKinney, Ethics and Political Judgment in Feminist Abortion Politics. Jonathan Obert, Six Guns and State Formation, the Co-Evolution of Public and Private Violence in American Political Development. Thomas Julian Wood, Ads, Visits, Contact, New Data on Presidential Campaign Effects. Alexandra Judith Moffett Batu, The Development of Political Identity and Public Housing Developments.
A representative from the Department of Psychology will now present to the Dean the recipient of the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Psychology.
Dean Small. The student I now present has attained scholarly distinction in advanced studies and has prepared a dissertation which contributes to knowledge in a particular field of research. On behalf of the faculty in the Department of Psychology, I have the honor to present her as recipient of the degree of Doctor of Philosophy.
You have successfully completed a program of advanced study in psychology. I now present you with the diploma and hood of the University of Chicago and welcome you to this ancient and honorable company of scholars.
Molly Elisabeth Flaherty, The Emergence of Argument Structural Devices in Nicaraguan Sign Language.
A representative from the John U. Neff Committee on Social Thought will now present to the Dean the recipient of the joint degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Social Thought and Germanic Studies.
Dean Small, the student I now present has attained scholarly distinction in advanced studies and has prepared a dissertation which contributes to knowledge in a particular field of research. On behalf of the faculty in the John U. Neff Committee on Social Thought and the Department of Germanic Studies, I have the honor to present him as recipient of the degree of Doctor of Philosophy.
You have successfully completed a program of advanced study in social thought and Germanic studies. I now present you with the hood of the University of Chicago and welcome you to this ancient and honorable company of scholars.
James McCormick, Towards an Ethical Literature, Character Narration, and Extended Subjectivity in the Work of Robert Musil.
The chair of the Department of Sociology will now present to the Dean the recipient of the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Sociology.
Dean Small, the student I now present, has attained scholarly distinction in advanced studies and has prepared a dissertation which contributes to knowledge in a particular field of research. On behalf of the faculty in the Department of Sociology, I have the honor to present her as recipient of the degree of Doctor of Philosophy.
You have successfully completed a program of advanced study in sociology. I now present you with the diploma and hood of the University of Chicago and welcome you to this ancient and honorable company of scholars.
Jennifer Berchtold, Supplying the Great White Way, Broadway Producers, Temporary Organization, and the Hazards of the Market.
I am honored to have the opportunity, on behalf of the Division of the Social Sciences, to congratulate you on the end of one chapter of your life and the beginning of another. In one of his most memorable speeches, Theodore Roosevelt said over 100 years ago that far and away, the best prize that life can offer is the chance to work hard at work worth doing. We all know the University of Chicago to be a place extraordinarily devoted to the pursuit of knowledge, a place where we learn to question persistently and relentlessly in the belief that education and self-education depends above all on the asking of questions. Everyone asks of everyone else all the time. But it is also a place that offers the opportunity to work hard, very hard, at something we all believe is worth doing. To work hard at generating knowledge, at developing new and better ways of understanding the social, of uncovering political and cultural and economic and historical, psychological dynamics that underlie the world around us. That is important work of the very highest order. That is the work that first brought you to the University of Chicago. Today, we mark your completion of one more threshold in pursuit of that noble, lifelong, collective cause. I use the word collective deliberately. As my predecessor in this role often said, today is also an opportunity for gratitude because you did not perform that work alone. So graduates, I ask that you rise and please turn and thank the parents, siblings, husbands and wives, daughters and sons, roommates, partners, and others who listened, helped, and prayed while you pursued your work here. Thank the people who helped you understand that your work here is collective in more senses than one. I also invite you to stay standing and turn back and face the faculty of the division to thank them for their work with you, for being the group that no matter how tough or accommodating, no matter how serious or jolly, never wavered in their belief in the nobility of this work and in your capacity to perform it. And finally, I ask that you take a moment to reflect and to thank yourself, something we probably all too often fail to do at the University of Chicago. If there is anything we learn in a culture of sharp, persistent inquiry, it is to doubt. And certainly, no good critical mind can doubt others without also doubting itself. Questioning the foundations of our own thoughts as individuals is, in that sense, probably the truest basis of our own work. But for that self-questioning to be not destructive but fruitful and generative, it also must be accompanied in the end by self-gratitude. You may and should thank yourself for embracing the spirit of this special, quirky institution, for challenging yourself, and most importantly, as evidenced by your presence here in this hall today, for never giving up. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once argued that the purpose of life was to overcome oneself again and again. You have overcome yourself. Through sacrifice and commitment, you have achieved a level of capacity and understanding and mental acuity that you did not have before you began. And as you have learned the worth, the value, and the joy of your own sacrifice with the help of others, I invite you to continue on that path of constant probing and to consider how else you might work to better the world you are about to enter. You are now permanently part of a university community that believes in the worth to the world of a particular kind of hard work. May you continue to serve others by embracing some new version of that kind of work. And may you continue to overcome yourself in other contexts again and again. I thank you for having shared your commitment with us, and I wish you good luck.
And now, with the congratulations of the faculty to our now former students and their families, and with the thanks of the faculty to our departing dean, we conclude the awarding of diplomas in the Division of the Social Sciences, and thus the 519th Convocation of the University of Chicago. Thank you.